What if the greatest secret to living a fuller, richer, more meaningful life wasn't about what you take, but what you give? You've spent years chasing success, trying to build a life that feels satisfying. You've worked hard for every penny, every opportunity, every small win. And maybe you found some happiness along the way. But deep down, there's still something missing, a quiet longing, a sense that no matter how much you achieve, it never quite feels like enough. That's because true fulfillment doesn't come from accumulation, it comes from contribution. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you gave, really gave, without expecting anything in return? Not just money, but your time, your attention, your energy. When was the last time you showed up for someone else simply because they needed you? If you can't remember, that's okay. Because today is your chance to change that. Today is your chance to discover something most people overlook, the incredible power hidden inside every generous act. Because here's the truth, giving isn't weakness. It isn't sacrifice. It's one of the strongest, most transformative things you can do, not just for others, but for yourself. Science confirms it. Psychology proves it. History remembers it. People who live generously don't just make the world better, they become better themselves. They feel more connected, more alive, more at peace with who they are and where they're going. And this isn't just about charity or grand gestures. This is about the everyday choices we make. To be kind when it's easier to be cold, to help when it's tempting to walk away, to give when everything inside us says to hold back. Because every time you choose generosity, you send a message to the universe and to yourself that you have more than enough, that you trust life, that you believe in something bigger than your own needs, and that belief changes everything. Think about the moments in your life when you've given freely. Maybe you gave someone your full attention when they were hurting, or maybe you offered help without being asked. Perhaps you shared your knowledge, your resources, or even just a few encouraging words. How did it make you feel? Chances are you felt something deep inside, a warmth, a glow, a sense of purpose that didn't come from receiving anything in return. That feeling is real, and it's powerful, because it's proof that you were built not just to survive, but to serve, not just to take, but to give. Now imagine living like that every single day, not out of obligation, not because you have to, but because you want to. Because you understand that giving isn't a loss, it's an investment. One that pays back in ways you may never see, but will always feel. So why does this matter? Why should you care about giving in a world that often rewards selfishness? Because the blessings of generosity aren't just spiritual or emotional, they're tangible, backed by science, measurable in real life. Studies show that people who give regularly experience lower stress, improved mental health, and even longer lifespans. Their brains light up with pleasure chemicals when they do something kind. Their hearts beat stronger. Their relationships deepen. Their lives expand. This isn't wishful thinking. It's neuroscience. Generosity rewires your brain. It builds resilience. It creates meaning. It turns ordinary days into extraordinary ones. Not because of what you gain, but because of who you become. Because the more you give, the more you start to see yourself differently. You begin to realize that you have something valuable to offer, that your presence matters, that your actions shape the world around you. And once you understand that, nothing stays the same. You stop holding back. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop asking, what's in it for me? And start asking, how can I help? Because you finally get it. Giving isn't about losing, it's about unlocking. Unlocking joy. Unlocking connection. Unlocking purpose. And the best part, you don't need to be rich, famous, or perfect to do it. You just need to be willing. Willing to show up. Willing to share. Willing to love without limits. Because every gift counts. Every gesture matters. Every time you choose generosity, you plant a seed that grows far beyond what you can see. So here's the question again. What if the key to a fuller, richer, more meaningful life isn't about what you take, but what you give? Because if you're ready to find out, keep watching. Because what's coming next will change the way you see everything. Not just about giving, but about life itself. Because the blessings of giving generously go far beyond what most people ever imagine. And once you understand them, you'll never look at generosity the same way again. You've just begun to understand the incredible power of giving, not as a sacrifice, but as a gateway to something greater. A life filled with deeper meaning, stronger connections, and an unshakable sense of purpose. But let's go even further now. Because here's what most people don't realize. When you give generously, something shifts inside you. It's not just about how it makes others feel, it's about how it makes you feel. There's a moment that happens, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming, when you realize that giving doesn't take from you, it adds to you. That every time you offer your time, your energy, your heart, you're not losing anything. You're gaining clarity. You're building strength. You're awakening something deep within yourself that no amount of success or wealth could ever replace. That feeling isn't random. It's rooted in science, in psychology, in the very way our brains are wired. Neuroscientists have found that acts of generosity activate the brain's reward system, the same system responsible for feelings of joy, satisfaction, and emotional fulfillment. When you give, your brain releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, chemicals linked to happiness, connection, and trust. This is your body's natural response to doing good. It's not just a moral choice, it's a biological one. So when you choose to help someone, even if no one else sees it, you feel it deeply, because your body knows what you've done, and it rewards you for it. Think about the last time you gave without expecting anything in return. Maybe you offered support to a friend who was struggling, or maybe you simply listened when someone needed to be heard. Perhaps you donated your time, your skills, or even just a few words of encouragement. How did it make you feel afterward? Most likely, you felt lighter, more at peace, like you had touched something real, something meaningful. That's not just your imagination. That's your brain reinforcing the truth. Giving makes you feel alive. And this effect compounds over time. The more you give, the more your brain begins to associate generosity with fulfillment. The more you start to crave that feeling, not because you want praise or recognition, but because it simply feels right. This is why people who live generously often say they get more than they give, because they do. Not always in material ways, but in emotional richness, in confidence, in gratitude, in inner peace. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need to wait until you have enough to start giving. You already have everything you need to begin today. You don't need to be wealthy. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to have all the answers. All you need is the willingness to show up for someone else and ultimately for yourself. Because every act of kindness, no matter how small, sends a message to your subconscious: I am capable. I am valuable. I can make a difference. And those messages build something powerful. They build self-worth. They build resilience. They build a life that matters. Now imagine living like that every single day. Imagine making generosity your default setting. Not out of guilt, not out of pressure, but out of choice. Out of belief. Belief that you have something to offer. That your presence has value. That your actions ripple far beyond what you can see. Because they do. When you give freely, you create a chain reaction. One that spreads far beyond your immediate circle. One that inspires others to give too. One that builds a world where compassion is stronger than competition. Where empathy outshines ego. And where kindness becomes the currency we all trade in. But the greatest gift of all is what it does to you. Because the more you give, the more you begin to see your own abundance. You stop focusing on what you lack and start recognizing all that you have. You become less attached to things and more connected to people. You find joy in the simple act of making someone else's day a little better. And in doing so, you unlock something rare and precious. A sense of contentment that doesn't depend on circumstances. A happiness that isn't tied to achievements or possessions. A peace that comes from knowing you lived fully, loved deeply, and gave boldly. So ask yourself this. What would your life look like if you made generosity your guiding principle? If every decision, every action, every word was filtered through the question, how can I add value here? Would you still hold back? Would you still hesitate? Or would you finally step into the fullness of who you're meant to be? Because here's the truth. You were never meant to keep your gifts to yourself. You were meant to share them, to pour them out into the world without fear, without calculation, without hesitation. Because when you do, something extraordinary happens. You don't just change someone else's life, you transform your own. You now understand the deep, almost magical way generosity transforms your inner world. How it rewires your brain for joy, strengthens your sense of self, and fills your life with meaning that no paycheck or title ever could. But there's something even greater at play, something most people never stop to consider. Because when you give generously, you're not just changing how you feel inside, you're setting something into motion that reaches far beyond you. Every time you offer your kindness, your time, your support, you create ripples. waves that move outward in ways you may never see but will always feel. And those ripples don't just fade away, they carry forward. They touch lives. They shift destinies. Think of a single drop falling into still water. At first, it seems so small, so insignificant, but watch closely. That one drop creates movement. It sends out circles that expand wider and wider, touching places far from where it first landed. Your acts of generosity are exactly like that. Maybe you gave someone your full attention when they were hurting. Maybe you offered help without being asked. Perhaps you simply said, "I see you, I hear you." Those moments may have felt small to you, but to the person on the receiving end, they could have been everything. And here's the incredible truth. Those ripples don't stop with them. They keep moving. That person, touched by your generosity, may go on to lift someone else, to show up stronger, to believe a little more in the goodness of people. And that person might do the same. This is how change happens. Not through grand gestures or viral moments, but through quiet, consistent acts of giving that spread unseen through the fabric of life. You may never know how far your kindness traveled. You may never hear the story of the person who kept going because of what you did. You may never see the future you helped shape. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. There's beauty in that. There's power in that. Because the greatest impact we make often happens long after we've forgotten about it. Sometimes it takes years before a seed of kindness blooms into something extraordinary. And yet, despite all this, many still hesitate. They hold back. They wait until they have enough or until the moment feels perfect. They tell themselves, "What difference can I really make?" But the truth is, you don't need to change the world to change someone's world. You don't need permission. You don't need recognition. You don't need to see the results right away. All you need is the willingness to act, to give, even when it feels uncertain, even when it costs something, even when no one is watching. Because every generous act is a spark. And sparks have a way of turning into flames. History is filled with moments that started small. Someone offering a helping hand, speaking up for another, sharing what they had, and ended up shaping the course of lives, communities, even nations. The ripple effect of generosity has launched movements, healed broken hearts, and turned despair into hope. You are part of that same current. The choices you make today, the way you decide to show up for others, are shaping the future in ways you can't yet see. You may not get credit for it. You may never receive a thank you. But that doesn't matter. Because the real reward isn't in the recognition. It's in knowing you chose to give anyway. It's in knowing you refused to stay silent when someone needed to be heard. You chose to step in when others walked away. You gave when keeping would have been easier. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. And that's who you become every time you choose generosity. So ask yourself this. What kind of ripples do you want to create? Do you want to send waves of kindness into the world? Do you want to leave behind a trail of hope, of healing, of connection? Do you want your presence to be a gift to those around you? Because you already have the power to do that. Right now, in this moment, you don't need more time, more money, or more resources. You only need the courage to act, to give freely, fully, and without hesitation. Because when you do, you become part of something much bigger than yourself. You become a force for good. A light in the darkness, a reason someone keeps going when things feel impossible. And that matters more than you'll ever know. So don't underestimate the power of your generosity. Don't doubt the value of your contribution. Don't question whether your giving makes a difference, because it does. Even if you never see it, even if you never hear about it, even if it takes years before the full impact reveals itself, trust that it matters. Trust that it spreads. Trust that it changes lives, including yours. Because every time you give, you remind the world and yourself that love is still alive, that compassion still exists, that humanity still has hope. And that is a blessing worth giving everything for. You now understand the deep ripple your generosity creates, how every act of giving sends waves far beyond what you can see. You've felt the emotional truth of it, the way kindness transforms not only others but yourself. And yet there's still a voice in many hearts that holds back. A whisper that says, but what if I give and get nothing in return? What if I end up with less? That fear is natural. It comes from a place deep inside us all. The instinct to protect, to survive, to make sure we have enough. But here's something most people never realize. Holding on to everything for yourself doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you small. Because the truth is, the more you give freely, the more abundance flows into your life, not because the universe owes you something, but because generosity opens doors that selfishness simply cannot. Think about the relationships in your life, the ones that feel strong, meaningful, lasting. Were they built on taking or on giving? Did you earn trust by keeping your distance or by showing up? Did you build connection by holding back or by offering your time, your heart, your support without hesitation? The people who truly thrive, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, are not those who hoard resources, love, or energy. They are those who pour themselves out, knowing that what matters most grows when shared. And science backs this up. Studies in behavioral economics show that generous people build stronger networks, gain deeper trust, and unlock opportunities that self-centered individuals miss entirely. Why? Because generosity builds value. It attracts people, it strengthens bonds, it fuels collaboration, it opens unseen doors. When you give without expecting anything in return, you become someone others want to support, uplift, and invest in. Not because they feel obligated, but because they feel inspired. This is the hidden law of life. What you put out comes back. Not always in the same form, not always at the same time, but always in some way. Think of it like planting seeds. If you scatter them across the ground and walk away, you'll never know what might grow. But if you water them, nurture them, care for them, you create the conditions for something beautiful to emerge. Your generosity is the same. Every gift you offer, every kind word, every moment you choose to serve rather than take. It plants a seed. Some will bloom immediately. Others may take years, but as long as you keep giving, you keep growing. And here's where the real magic happens. The more you give, the more you begin to see abundance everywhere. You stop looking at life through the lens of scarcity, of not having enough, of needing to protect what's yours, and start seeing it through the eyes of possibility, of opportunity, of overflow. Because the truth is, you already have more than enough to give. More time than you think, more strength than you believe, more love than you allow yourself to share. And when you start living from that place, when you shift from fear to faith, from holding back to pouring out, you begin to experience something extraordinary. You begin to live with freedom. Not the kind that comes from having everything figured out, but the kind that comes from knowing that even when you give everything, you still have more than enough. Because you do. Every time you choose generosity, you prove that to yourself. You remind your heart that you are not defined by what you own, but by what you offer. That your worth isn't measured by your bank account, but by the lives you touch. That your true wealth lies not in what you keep, but in what you give. So ask yourself, what would happen if you lived every day like this? If you gave freely, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. If you stopped calculating the costs and started embracing the reward, not just for others, but for yourself, what would change? Would you hold back less? Would you love more deeply? Would you speak with more courage? Would you step into places you once feared because you knew you were coming from a place of strength, not lack? Because that's the power of generosity. It doesn't weaken you. It empowers you. It gives you confidence. It builds resilience. It fuels purpose. It unlocks joy that no amount of money could buy. And here's the greatest secret of all. The blessings of giving don't come after you give. They begin the moment you decide to. They begin when you let go of fear, when you open your hands, when you say yes to helping, even when it costs something, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching. Because that's when you become unstoppable. Because that's when you discover the truth that changes everything. You were never meant to live small. You were meant to give boldly, to love fiercely, to live fully. And when you do, the world shifts, not because you demanded it to, but because you led by example. Because you chose to be the kind of person who adds value, who lifts others, who believes that the best way to receive is to first give. And that belief, that choice, will shape your life in ways you can't yet imagine. So don't wait. Don't hesitate. Give now. Give boldly. And watch as the blessings begin to unfold, not just around you, but within you. You've begun to see the truth. Giving is not a loss. It's a transformation, a force that reshapes your life, strengthens your heart, and opens doors you never thought possible. You felt the power in knowing that every generous act sends ripples far beyond what you can see. And yet there's still a shadow that lingers for many, a quiet fear that holds them back. What if I give too much? What if I end up with nothing? What if no one gives back to me? These are the questions that keep people small, that build walls where bridges should be, that turn hearts away from generosity, not because they don't want to give, but because they're afraid of what it might cost them. But let's speak honestly now. What is the cost of not giving? What happens when we close our hands, when we shut ourselves off from others, when we decide that survival means holding on to everything, protecting what's ours at all costs? The answer is simple and painful. We lose something deeper than material things. We lose connection. We lose joy. We lose meaning. Here's the truth. Hoarding your gifts doesn't protect you. It isolates you. People who live only for themselves often find that success feels hollow, that achievements ring empty, that no matter how much they gain, it never quite fills the space inside that only love, purpose, and contribution can reach. They may have money. They may have power. But they lack something far more valuable. They lack depth. They lack real relationships. They lack the kind of fulfillment that comes not from getting, but from giving. And science agrees. Psychological studies show that those who live selfishly experience higher rates of loneliness, depression, and emotional instability. Their lives may look impressive on the surface, but underneath there's a quiet erosion happening, one that no amount of external validation can stop. Because human beings were never meant to live in isolation. We were built for connection, for community, for shared purpose. And the deepest form of connection isn't created through transaction. It's created through generosity. When you give freely, you invite people in. You open yourself to trust. You build bonds that go beyond convenience or necessity. You create relationships that are rooted not in what someone can do for you, but in what you're willing to do for them. That changes everything. It changes how you see others. It changes how they see you. It changes how you feel about yourself. Because when you give without expecting anything in return, you prove to yourself that you are enough. That your value doesn't come from what you own, but from how you show up. That your presence matters, not because of what you take, but because of what you offer. So ask yourself this. What has holding back truly given you? Has it brought peace? Has it brought joy? Has it brought deep, lasting fulfillment? Has it simply kept you safe while the world moved forward without you? Because the saddest prison isn't made of walls or lock. It's the one built from fear, from saying no when your heart wanted to say yes, from staying silent when someone needed your voice, from keeping your love locked away because you were afraid of getting hurt. That's not protection. That's self-limitation. And the longer you stay there, the more you begin to forget who you really are. Not someone who survives, but someone who thrives when they give. Someone who shines when they serve. Someone who finds their truest self in the act of lifting others. So imagine what would happen if you stepped out of that place today. If you stopped asking, what will I lose? And started asking, what can I offer? If you gave not because you had to, but because you wanted to. If you showed up for someone else not just because they needed you, but because you needed to give. Because that's when something shifts. That's when you remember your strength. That's when you reconnect with your purpose. That's when you start living fully again. Because generosity doesn't weaken you. It liberates you. It frees you from fear, from scarcity, from the belief that you must always protect what's yours. And in its place, it builds something unshakable. Confidence, joy, connection, meaning. So don't wait, don't hesitate, or don't hold back any longer. Your gifts were never meant to be hidden. Your love was never meant to be withheld. Your generosity was never meant to be rationed. Give now, give boldly, and watch as your life begins to change. Not because you received something in return, but because you finally became who you were always meant to be. You now understand the truth. Giving is not weakness. It is strength, not sacrifice. It is expansion, not loss. It is transformation. You felt the power in knowing that every generous act sends ripples far beyond what you can see. You've seen how giving rewires your brain for joy, builds unshakable confidence, and unlocks a deeper sense of purpose than anything else ever could. You've confronted the fear of giving too much and realized that holding back doesn't protect you. It limits you. But here's where everything changes. Because understanding all this means nothing if it stays in your mind and never moves into action. Knowledge without action is like a seed that never gets planted. It may be full of potential, but it will never grow. So now comes the moment that defines everything. The moment when you decide, will you continue living from a place of fear, of hesitation, of waiting until the time feels right? Or will you finally step forward and give? Not because you have to, not because someone asked, but because you choose to. Because something inside you now knows the truth. Generosity is not about what you lose. It's about who you become. And the only way to truly discover that is to start giving, not once, not occasionally, but consistently, boldly, without hesitation, without calculation. Just give. Give your time, even when you feel busy. Give your love, even when you're afraid of being hurt. Give your support, even when no one is watching. Give your energy, even when you think you have little left. Because here's what happens when you do. You begin to live with purpose. You begin to walk with confidence. You begin to feel something deep inside, a fire, a glow, a certainty that tells you you're exactly where you're meant to be. Because you are no longer living for yourself alone. You are living for something greater. And that changes everything. So ask yourself, what would happen if today was the day you decided to give more freely than ever before? If you chose to show up for someone else not just because they needed you, but because you needed to give? What if you gave not expecting anything in return, but simply because it felt right? Because that choice, this very moment, is where your transformation begins. It starts the second you choose to act. When you offer your kindness even when others are cold. When you help even when it's inconvenient. When you share even when you feel like you have little. That is when you prove to yourself that you are strong. That is when you build resilience. That is when you create the kind of life that matters. Because generosity isn't just an action, it's a mindset, a way of living, a declaration that you are not ruled by fear or scarcity, but by faith, by abundance. A belief that the more you give, the more you receive, not always in material ways, but in emotional richness, in clarity, in peace. So don't wait for perfect timing. Don't wait until you feel ready. Because the moment you give, you become ready. The moment you give, you become powerful. The moment you give, you begin to unlock the blessings you've been seeking all along. So take that step now. Let go of hesitation. Let go of fear. Let go of the need to calculate every move. And instead, open your hands. Open your heart. And give. Give generously. Give boldly. Give without limits. Because the world needs more people like you. People who lead with love. People who lift others. People who believe that the greatest form of success is service. And as you do, something extraordinary will happen. You won't just change someone else's life. You'll change your own forever.